when migrating any legacy system, an existing system within the organization, to a new system, here illustrated on the far right as the cloud system or known as the enterprise system, there are things that you need to consider and risk that does occur that will drive up your cost. So stay tuned. We're going to jump into this very brief explanation just around data challenges when organizations decide to migrate, and some people don't migrate quite as quickly as others. So stay tuned. We're going to jump right to it. So the reality is here, when you migrate data from a legacy system, the data has to have full integrity as it goes into that enterprise system. In other words, as illustrated at the top of the screen here, the legacy system to be migrated has specific data. When the migration occurs, the legacy system is typically shut down. Access is denied briefly while that data is migrated to the enterprise system. Then that service, illustrated on the right, is then advertised to the users as the enterprise system. And the reason why we do this is because we don't want to get the data set from the legacy system on the left side and the data set in the enterprise system on the right side out of sync. We want to make sure that they're always in sync. Now, you can achieve this through a synchronous relationship between those data sets. In other words, copying data back and forth. But most large migrations, it's too cost inhibitive and complicated to do that. So typically we would migrate the data to the enterprise system and at the same time kind of take a snapshot of that legacy system at time of migration and push that data into a data lake. Now, the reason why we use a data lake in this model is to kind of give us that plan B in the event something doesn't go right with the enterprise migration. We can obviously roll back, but more important, we can use that legacy data for other things like artificial intelligence. We can use it for future development testing. We can use it for archival and analytics, really not archival, but analytics. That type of function is certainly available once that data reaches that data lake, illustrated there as the fish with the data. So what happens, kind of shifting gears, what happens if the legacy system has been migrated and you decide to continue to use it after all the data is on the enterprise system? Well, this creates numerous problems. I'm only illustrating here on this screen data-related problems, but there will be problems with other systems within the organization. Remember, data uses multiple systems, and so that data, if it gets broken or orphaned, as illustrated on the bottom of the screen, because somebody went back and used the legacy system, well, that data now becomes orphaned throughout all of the systems. That becomes extremely problematic. So the moral to this story, when your system is migrated, don't use the legacy system. Unfortunately, in many environments, legacy architecture supports multiple systems, and in large environments, you can't just turn it off because other systems will migrate. It could take a year to migrate all of the systems. So you have to have that discipline to not go back and use the legacy system because it's going to create these orphaned files. Now, in closing, on the right-hand side, so what happens when that file gets orphaned? Well, it gets orphaned from the enterprise system, upper right of the screen. And that enterprise system is the system record, is what we call it, or the real truth of what the data should be. Because it's orphaned, that data is not represented in the enterprise system. So now all of the changes, additions, edits, all of that stuff that you made on the not you, an individual made on the legacy system after it was migrated, now becomes lost. right? You have to manually adjust it. So what you have to do, number one there, lower right-hand corner, we have to fish the data, the original data, right? Remember when we migrated, we did a copy into the data lake. And if you're migrating data and you're not using a data lake, I would strongly suggest you use something so that when you get orphans, you can figure out what that orphan file is, where reality is. But here, we fish out the old data in the data lake. We find that data, which is a challenge, especially in large data lakes. Then we have to compare the migrated data to all of the orphan data. So represented here is just one file, but there could be thousands and thousands of files that have been impacted. So you have to compare all of the orphans to the data as it was originally migrated. Then step 3, you're going to have to take that delta, which represents the orphan data, and create a package and move it into the enterprise system. What is the moral to this story? Don't use your legacy systems after they've been migrated to the enterprise system, and you can avoid all of this challenge. Although, having done this for many decades, there's always the time where an orphan data set will occur, and you need to be prepared. And so the bottom of the screen, really having this data lake or some place to put that data so you can do that comparison and move those orphans back into the enterprise system, is a wise investment of time and cost. You can eliminate this data lake in the future if you don't want to use it for analytics and other purposes, but certainly important to use for discovering and migrating those orphan files.